I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into the questions, Senator Sacchieri. First and foremost, what are your top priorities heading into this 2026 session?
I would say that just because of what we've heard from the last year, ad valorem is going to be a big one for me. And honestly, I didn't file a lot of heavy hitting ones just because I knew with the state question and all of that, I knew there was going to be a lot on the cash for property tax reform. My background is property tax. I was an assessor. I understand it very well. So I'm actually looking forward to being the voice of reason, able to bring all sides to the table and say how this is going to help or hurt. So I think good ad valorem reform that would help everybody is one of my priorities.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that ad valorem? Because if I hear that, especially if I'm a listener, I might not know what that really means or what this reform might take place. Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Property tax, yes, I'm sorry. So property tax reform. Throughout my first year, lots of emails, lots of handwritten letters from elderly that are struggling. And then we saw the state question come up in the last few months that said that it would do away with homesteads paying property tax. And if that passes, that will cause a burden. So we need to be prepared, and I'm here for that. So I filed, a lot of probably you don't really call them sexy bills, but bills that I understand and that in my role as assessor that need to be tweaked that will help. But I know there'll be a lot of homestead reform bills, exemptions, lowering the constitutional cap. There'll be a lot of those. And I just want to be there for my constituent or for my colleagues whenever they start debating these bills on the floor and make sure we're going to help everybody, not just pull funding from one and not fix it.
You recently just joined the Oklahoma Freedom Caucus, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
So does I know you guys are the whole group is really big on tax reform, especially property taxes and just income tax in general. Do you think having them on your side this year would maybe help you achieve your goals in terms of those tax reforms?
Yeah, I think Freedom Caucus, we're young, we're brand new, so in its infancy, we are still learning how to work together. Anytime you start putting a bunch of legislators together as a team, it does take time to understand and put guardrails in place on how we're going to work together. But a priority would be just in general, what is the role of government? That's what Freedom Caucus, it's kind of the North Star of the Constitution and reminding other legislators this is what you swore an oath to, and this is what it says here, and this is a role of government, or this is not. So yeah, when it comes to property tax reform, constitutional, we need to make sure we're doing the right things with it, and sufficiently funding everything, but not overly. So yeah, I think Freedom Caucus will be a good one to hold people's feet to the fire on doing the right thing.
I know Dusty Devers is really big on just getting rid of the income tax in general for the state. Are you of the same thought?
The income tax or the
Yeah,
property
the
tax?
state income tax.
Okay. Of course, income, any kind of tax that is punishing labor or punishing those that are working hard to create economic output for our state, that's a hard tax. But I, it's either one or the other right now, property tax or income tax. So I'm scared to say we just cut the income tax. Let's see where that puts us this year. Let's focus on property tax instead now, because I've even heard from some people that say, you know what, as much as we don't like income tax, we actually do not like our property tax more. I would pay a little income tax to supplement that property tax loss.
And so you kind of mentioned there kind of a strategy at play, kind of compromise a little bit of, yes, you feel the same way about the state income tax, but we have to get other things done first in order to achieve, the ultimate goal of, let's say, the income tax. Can you speak a little bit about that when you're at the legislature? How much does that compromise really is on the top of your mind to try to get things done for the people in your district?
Well, first of all, a property tax and an income tax are not interchangeable. So people need to understand that, and some of my Republican colleagues even say, we'll just replace it with a consumption tax or something else. And it's like, this is a local tax. Property tax is local. It's a different beast. You cannot just simply do away with it and not replace it with something very similar like it. So like I said earlier, in my top priorities, I didn't file the heavy hitting property tax bills. I'm here to be the voice of reason and be devil's advocate whenever they bring these bills to the table. you have to think in those terms of these are two separate types of taxes. So you have to be very careful whenever you try to replace one with the other.
You mentioned a lot about taxes here. Are there any other problems you want the legislature to really tackle this session? I know I've seen some videos of you on X about data centers. Is data centers another area you want to kind of tackle or at least look into?
That one is probably more of my priority or hearing from my district. Luckily, not too much has come into District 43. Now we're starting to see them right outside of District 43, Chickasha and no, I think Slaughterville, Noble area. So they're encroaching, and I hear from a lot of people, we don't want these here. So that one's probably more for my district. Problems that I think the legislature needs to solve this session is going to be education. People are to a point of fix it and fix it the right way. You need to be listening. Well, this is Kendal speaking now. You need to be listening to the teachers more than anybody. That's the one voice that's really, we've seen the state chamber come into play now and their priorities, and the legislatures come in and give their priorities. And the one missing link is the educators. I was previously an educator. That was my degree. And I can fully attest that that's the ones that need to be at the table talking.
What are the teachers telling you when you talk to them when you're on the ground in your district?
I've had some, and I'm going to try to run a bill either next year, but there are teachers that doesn't make it past them. I've had teachers reach out and say, "Hey, you want to keep teachers in the classroom? We need to fix how they use vacation days." There's really no incentive to keep your vacation days. A lot of them burn them, and then you have teachers that are out 2 or 3 weeks at a time if they've hit their cap. There's things to look at that need to be fixed on that side. So I've had teachers that say, we want to see you do something there. And then, sorry, my little one, kind of lost train of thought there. Teachers are struggling with no backup, I think, as far as discipline. And it's hard to be a teacher when you're passionate about a subject and you can't teach because you're dealing with 32 kids in a class, and there's no, you can try to keep them in their seat and to focus and to listen, but if there's no discipline there, you're not going to get very far. So I can tell from these teachers this is very frustrating to them, and being one myself, I know it is a big problem.
I know on the Senate side, I saw the Education Committee, I believe it was on the Senate side, it might have been the House, talking about maternity leave and paternity leave. I think maternity leave was passed last year. They're looking at paternity leave. Are you like that proposal in terms of adding on paternity leave and even adding on the notion of if you adopt, you can take paternity leave and maternity leave as well?
So I haven't looked at the language yet on that at all. Of course, I'm a big proponent of keeping the family together, and it's such a forgotten thing. So yes, I'm very sympathetic to that cause. I'm also very, as a conservative, you also have to think, what kind of a burden am I going to create for my employees whenever you do this? So I haven't read the language or how it works, extending it. The adoption, I think, is great. I think if you're bringing in a newborn, you probably need to be home with your kid for the first 6 weeks at least.
And so, what do you think, in terms of Southwest Oklahoma specifically, what needs need to be addressed at the Capitol? What needs do you think are under-addressed at the Capitol right now? If, I'm assuming maybe the city and Oklahoma City and Tulsa get a little bit more eyes on them. What do you think in Southwest Oklahoma is being underutilized or underlooked at?
No, you're right. Usually the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And as far as Southwest Oklahoma, water, I'd say water is a major one, and funding for our small towns and its infrastructure. Those are very important to me, and they're proper functions of government that I think need to be fully funded, sufficient year over year. So those two things I think are the big ones for Southwest Oklahoma. It's fixing the infrastructure. I mean, I know my Tri-City area right now is we're a year or two out, and then we will have no water. And the price tag to fix that is hundreds of millions of dollars. So I have spoke to our appropriations chair. I've said, what can we do? We had a bill last year. It didn't make it through. Why didn't it make it through for our rural communities? So I hope that he's taking that seriously this year. But those are probably the two bigger ones I hear from, at least from my city councils and things like that, is just we need more funding. And they're 100% right. We can't expect these small towns to generate that kind of money with their sales tax. So we have to be able to fund them from the state.
Is that one of the main things you're looking at in terms of budget, really trying to make sure money gets to infrastructure and get to water? Is there any other areas you hope the budget really reaches this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those two are critical. Like I said, we're to a point of we will have no water if we do not fix this. So those two are my biggest focuses as far as that.
Where do you expect the kind of disagreements? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, talking to the appropriations chair in terms of why didn't certain bills get passed. Where do you expect the biggest disagreements to be this session? Parties, chambers, or within the Republican caucus in general?
Well, and you got to throw in another caveat. Don't forget, we have an executive branch that we have to work with too and agree upon. He has the power of the pen there. So that one always seems to be outside of last year. It usually always seems to be chambers versus executive branch, or chamber against chamber. So last year, chambers got along great. It was executive branch that was kind of button heads, but we got along pretty well last year. This year, of course, parties don't usually agree. We don't agree on gun rights. We don't agree on where the spending should go. So we'll always have those disagreements, but being just such a strong, ultra conservative state, you don't really see too much of that battle, even though it's there. So that just really leaves, yeah, it leaves our own party. And I think we all agree that we want to make this better, this state better. We just all cannot come to the table yet and agree on how we're going to do that. So I am hoping and praying this year as people are screaming for education reform and help. People are saying, I can't afford this anymore. Our water is bad. We need new roads. I hope we can all come together and find those dollars and say, okay, where is it that we have wasted and we have found fraud? Because we've had a lot of that in the last even just a couple of years. Auditor Byrd has discovered millions of dollars of fraud. So it's time to say, you know what, guys, we're going to do our job. We're going to scrutinize these budgets. We're going to get these FTEs under control. We're gonna do this so we can make sure we have enough dollars for what is proper government.
You mentioned that sort of conflict sometimes with the governor's office. Obviously, there's an election this year. We're going to have a brand new governor by the end of the year, at least one elected. Do you think that, on the horizon is going to keep certain battles from coming to fruition that might have happened in earlier years? So basically, Governor Stitt last year out is not going to have that battle too much anymore?
That's up to him and his office. He's been in there 8 years now. Does he have any fight left in him for the last of his priorities? Has he got everything he's wanted? We're waiting to hear that from him. I think the state of the state will reveal a lot of that. He, we meet with him in interim, and we kind of cornered him for what's going to be your priorities. So he didn't really have too many. Maybe, here's a few of my EOs that I signed you can look at and codify, but he didn't really give us anything big. So either he has some big stuff on the horizon and he's just not telling us, or he really is maybe just to a point of ready to move on and let the next guy take the heat for a while.
Yeah. So what's one misconception you hear about that lawmakers can do, but what's the reality? Let's say you hear somebody, oh, I believe lawmakers can do this, this, and that, or I think you can do this, but you're really not. But in reality, you can't really do that sort of thing because of the checks and balances, because of the systems at play.
Probably two big ones come to mind is, first of all, I'm state. So I do get a lot of federal emails. So we work well with our federal delegation. I'm always happy to call Representative Cole's office or whoever is the fitting congressman. But that's probably the biggest one, is what I can do as a state legislator versus federal when people have major concerns with what's going on in Congress. The other thing I thought of was that different elected officials' positions is a big one. So I do get a lot of emails and calls on, maybe what a county official is doing or not doing, hey, they're not fixing my road, or they're not getting out here, things like that. While I can, make a phone call, but I really have no power there to tell these other elected officials what they can and can't do with their state or with their local dollars, et cetera.
You mentioned in the beginning of that answer federal issues. You kind of get a bunch of issues or emails, notes on that. Obviously, one of the big ones that's in the national news now in terms of a national issue, but sometimes does creep in on Oklahoma, is immigration, ICE. I recently interviewed a candidate for governor, Chip Keaton, about how we need more expanded role in terms of cooperation with ICE. Do you believe the same thing? We need more cooperation. I know we don't really see the same thing we're seeing in Minnesota right here in Oklahoma. Of course, we're being really conservative. But are you looking at that? Are you afraid that might come to Oklahoma? What are your concerns about that? In terms of, obviously, I know you're probably, in favor of ICE and immigration reform or immigration battling against illegal immigration, let's say. Are you afraid of, let's say, people against ICE coming to Oklahoma or a lot of protests taking place?
I don't know. Yeah, you said it. Oklahoma's very conservative. I just don't see that happening here. I really am a fan of like the 287G program where we can get our local law enforcement involved and part of ICE. I forget the word. Deputized, I guess you would say, to do the role of ICE. So then we are entrusting the guys that are in our backyard, the guys that we know and can trust. I think that's what you're seeing a lot of in Minnesota is people coming in that you don't know, federal agents. So I really like that 287G program. I would love to see that extended more and our county sheriffs going gun ho that way, because then we know who is here and who is protecting us, and we know that they're going to be held accountable.
I think that kind of gets into federal versus state rights a little bit, don't you think, about having federal agents come into your state? Instead of that, you have your local law enforcement that actually knows the state, lives in the community, enforce, while it is immigration laws, is still, the local people coming in. Do you see it like that too?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm conservative, and what's the one thing that we love the most is local control. We want our sheriff to be the main dog. We want him calling the shots anytime the feds come in, whether it's ICE or DHS or anything. We want that federal agent, FBI, they're coming into, guns, whatever. We want them going through our sheriff first and him making the decision. So yes, as a conservative, you always promote that first, local control.
So earlier in the interview, you mentioned taxes and education as the issues you really hope to tackle, at least the legislature tackles this session. Do you think those are the issues that are going to define this legislative session in 2026, or do you think there might be another issue that might creep into and come at play?
I'd say there'll always be one that creeps in. It always seems that no matter what fails, there'll be something that comes late in the game, April timeframe that nobody knew was on their radar. And well, that's just expected. We're only in session 4 months. You think nothing happens during the rest of the time. So yeah, I think something will come up. We just aren't sure of. But education, I think, is going to be a defining one this year, for sure. Just from what we've seen from state chamber and everybody else already getting out ahead of this. I just don't see how it couldn't be education.
All right, Senator Sacchieri, I have one last question for you, then I'll let you get off of this call. If you can tell, Southwest Oklahoma residents one thing about what you're really focused on this session, you're going to only tell them one thing, what would that be?
I just need them to know that I have done everything I can to guard their liberty when it comes to these bills. There's a lot of good-hearted, intended bills out there that would, as a consequence, infringe on possibly a First Amendment right or a Second Amendment right. So I'm always basing it off of the Constitution when I vote on these bills. Don't believe the narratives that you see on sometimes, whatever. I haven't really had those yet, but you can always, change the narrative of what a bill would do. And just always call my office if you're concerned. But guarding liberty is my number one priority with every bill that comes up for a vote. A second close would be I'm going to be guarding your tax dollars as hard as I can this year. Spending needs to be sufficient and good when it comes to what is proper functions of government. Outside of that, I've heard it from a lot of people, stop the fraud, the waste, and the abuse, because we've seen it enough, and people are ready to see it kind of get tightened up and back to what is important.
All right, Senator Sacchieri, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you ever want to talk mid-session or anything, any bills you need, to let your voice be known on, just let me know. Reach out to me. I'll have you back on.
Thank you, Justin. You've always been very kind.